On March 12, 2020, on the outskirts of Nashville, Tennessee, a quiet and unassuming day turned dark. A construction worker minding his own business nearby stumbled upon a terrifying scene and immediately called emergency services. What initially appeared to be an accident was, in fact, a deliberate and horrific execution. This wasn't just about death. It was about how far someone would go to protect their hidden world, and the monsters they would unleash to do it. Holly Williams, born Holly Ann Williams on January 14, 1987 in Nashville, was a confident woman. Friends described her in contrasting terms. Some saw her as a kind-hearted and modest soul, while others spoke of her as fiercely independent and strong-willed. Holly had always been captivated by beauty. She saw artistry in the world around her and was drawn to creative expression from a young age. Her passion for aesthetics and beautification led her to pursue a career in the beauty industry. By mid-2017, Holly graduated from the Georgia Career Institute in Murfreesboro, earning her cosmetology license by September of the same year. With great ambition and determination, she launched her own business, Shine Aesthetics, where she specialized in makeup, skincare treatments, and eyelash extensions. Her beauty salon was not just a business. It was an extension of who she was. Holly herself was the very embodiment of the brand, stylish, polished, and always exuding warmth. Her clients admired her not just for her professional skills, but for the care and passion she infused into her work. A friend once remarked how exceptional Holly was at her craft, noting that her drive and enthusiasm made her shine in more ways than one. Despite her flourishing career, Holly's personal life was much more complicated, especially when it came to her relationship with William Lanway. William, or Bill as most called him, had a life marked by tumult. Born on March 17, 1983 in Clarksville, Montgomery County, Tennessee, his early childhood was shadowed by tragedy. At just 3.5 years old, he witnessed the violent death of his mother, Candy K. Williams, who was brutally murdered by his father, Lyle Lanway. The murder happened in their home, nearly before Bill's eyes. His father, tormented by jealousy or mental instability, had threatened to shoot both his wife and son before finally taking Candy's life with a knife. This horrific event left an indelible mark on young Bill, and from that moment on, his upbringing fell to his relatives, who raised him with love and care, attempting to shield him from further emotional damage. As Bill grew older, he tried to lead a normal life. At the age of 20, he married Dana Rucker, and the couple welcomed a daughter, Madison, into the world 3 years later. The birth of his daughter seemed to bring some light into Bill's otherwise difficult life. Madison was cherished deeply by her parents, but in another cruel twist of fate, the young girl was diagnosed with brain cancer. Despite their best efforts and numerous treatments, Madison passed away on September 21, 2011. This loss devastated Bill, who spiraled into grief and depression. The strain on his marriage with Dana became too great, and the couple eventually divorced. From that point on, Bill's life was punctuated by emotional turmoil. Friends and family noted that he became more withdrawn, often concealing his emotions behind a facade of quiet composure. But underneath that exterior, there was a constant battle with his inner demons. His outbursts of aggression and nervous breakdowns became more frequent, and it was clear to those close to him that he was struggling. Yet he found solace in his work as a mechanic. Bill's hands-on work provided a distraction from his pain, and the routine of fixing cars helped him to maintain some semblance of stability. It is worth noting that Bill's character seemed to transform in social settings. Whenever he attended parties or spent time in bars, his usually reserved and troubled demeanor gave way to a more lively and charismatic persona. In these moments, he became cheerful, sociable, and seemingly carefree. It was in such settings that he and Holly initially bonded. When Bill met Holly Williams, it seemed like life was offering him another chance at happiness. Their attraction to each other was immediate, and the pair soon began dating. In the early days, their relationship appeared to be smooth and full of affection. They spent a great deal of time together, and those around them believed they were a happy couple. However, as time went on, the dynamic between them shifted. Their relationship quickly revealed its dark side. What began as an exciting romance with grand gestures and passionate affection soon turned into a cycle of jealousy, manipulation, and emotional swings. Bill, still grappling with unresolved trauma from his childhood and the loss of his daughter, displayed erratic behavior. His intense emotions often spilled over into their relationship, with bouts of jealousy leading to heated arguments. The carefree nature of their romance eroded, replaced by tension and volatility. Despite these ups and downs, Bill had a way of reeling Holly back in with apologies, gifts, and promises to change, perpetuating a toxic dynamic that neither seemed able to escape. As their relationship progressed, Bill's behavior grew more troubling. He provoked quarrels over minor issues, and his temper escalated to the point where he physically assaulted Holly on more than one occasion. Holly, who had once seen a future with him, began to fear for her safety. When she eventually decided it was time to leave the toxic relationship, Bill resorted to manipulative tactics to keep her close. He used his deceased daughter from a previous marriage as emotional leverage, making Holly feel guilty for wanting to leave him in his time of need. While Holly sympathized with his grief and inner turmoil, her patience was not limitless. She tried to support him as long as she could, but Bill's instability only deepened, and her attempts to distance herself were met with increased aggression. His desperation grew, and with it, his violent tendencies. Holly, who was fiercely independent and focused on her career, found herself repeatedly drawn back to Bill. Perhaps she believed that she could help him heal, or perhaps she was simply caught in the emotional roller coaster that defined their relationship. One incident in particular pushed Holly to her breaking point. After returning home from work one day, she discovered her beloved dog dead. The pet had shown no signs of illness, and its sudden death raised immediate suspicions in Holly's mind. Bill denied any involvement, but Holly was certain that it was an act of revenge, meant to punish her for trying to leave him. The incident solidified her fears, making her realize that staying with him would put her life in danger. This marked the definitive end of their relationship, but Bill refused to accept the breakup. He continued to stalk and harass her, calling her incessantly and showing up at her home unannounced. Their toxic relationship reached a critical point one day when a heated altercation led to police intervention. Bill was arrested and charged with aggravated assault and kidnapping after attempting to force Holly into his car. In the wake of this event, Holly obtained a restraining order, hoping it would provide her with some measure of safety. But the relief was short-lived. Just 1 week later, both Holly and Bill were found dead under mysterious circumstances. The discovery of their bodies initially led authorities to believe that it was the result of a tragic accident. A passerby had reported finding a car at a construction site in the southwest part of Nashville. The vehicle appeared to have rolled off the road and crashed into a tree. The witness assumed the people inside had been injured in a collision, but when police arrived on the scene, they quickly realized that something far more sinister had occurred. Holly and Bill were both found in the back seat of the car, their bodies contorted in unnatural positions. They had been shot, and the interior of the car showed no signs consistent with an accident. What was even more puzzling was the fact that neither Holly nor Bill had any identification or personal belongings on them. Their cell phones, wallets, and other items were missing, leading investigators to suspect that this was not a random event. Upon identifying the victims, detectives were startled to realize that this was the same couple involved in a recent domestic violence case. Initially, they considered the possibility of a murder-suicide, assuming that Bill might have killed Holly before turning the gun on himself. Given their troubled history, this theory seemed plausible at first. However, as the investigation unfolded, the murder-suicide theory began to unravel. For one, no firearm was recovered from the scene. If Bill had indeed killed Holly and then himself, where was the gun? Furthermore, forensic analysis revealed that the nature of the wounds Bill sustained made it impossible for him to have inflicted them on himself. Each gunshot wound was fatal, indicating that someone else had pulled the trigger. The bullets had been fired with precision, suggesting the involvement of someone skilled in handling firearms. As detectives delved deeper into the case, they interviewed Holly's friends and family, learning that she had taken significant steps to protect herself from Bill in the months leading up to her death. She had installed security cameras and reinforced the locks on her doors, hoping to safeguard herself from his increasingly erratic behavior. When the police reviewed footage from the cameras, they discovered unsettling evidence. Bill had been seen lurking around Holly's home on several occasions, wandering the property as if searching for something. His actions confirmed his obsession with her and his inability to move on. But it also raised questions about whether he was truly responsible for the final, deadly encounter. In addition to the footage, witnesses came forward to report seeing Holly and Bill together on the evening of March 11th, just hours before their bodies were found. Strangely, the couple appeared to be having a calm conversation, with no visible signs of hostility between them. This detail threw investigators off course, suggesting that perhaps their relationship had taken a turn toward reconciliation, or at least a temporary truce. Whatever the nature of their interaction that night, it did not seem to suggest that a violent altercation was on the horizon. The absence of a weapon, combined with the forensic evidence, led authorities to explore alternative theories. Could Holly and Bill have been victims of a third party? Their missing belongings pointed to a possible kidnapping scenario. If they had been abducted and forced into the car at gunpoint, it would explain why they were found in such an unnatural position. But who would want them dead? And why? As investigators continued to piece together the events leading up to their deaths, the case grew increasingly complex. Holly and Bill's deaths were no accident, and the initial theories of a simple crime of passion proved insufficient. It became clear that this was a premeditated double murder, carried out by someone who knew they were doing. The mystery surrounding their deaths became darker and more frightening. One thing became clear as the investigation progressed. Holly Williams and William Bill Lanway had been murdered. Their bodies were stuffed inside the white Acura, and the car was deliberately pushed off the side of the road in an attempt to stage a traffic accident. It was evident that a third person, or perhaps multiple individuals, were involved. Whoever was responsible for the crime seemed to want to make the deaths look like an unfortunate accident. But the staging was sloppy and incomplete, suggesting either haste or incompetence. Despite the amateurish attempt at a cover-up, the perpetrator had taken care to avoid leaving fingerprints or other traceable evidence in the vehicle, adding further complexity to the case. As detectives dug deeper, one of the early theories they explored was that the murders may have been an act of revenge. Bill had a notorious temper and a troubled history, and it wasn't difficult to imagine that he had made enemies over the years. Family members and acquaintances confirmed that Bill's fiery personality had often gotten him into trouble, leading to altercations and strained relationships. The possibility that one of his enemies sought retribution seemed plausible, but it still left the question of Holly's involvement. She was by all accounts a peaceful and kind-hearted person, the complete opposite of Bill in temperament. Why would she be targeted? Perhaps, detectives theorized, she'd simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, an innocent witness to someone else's vendetta. To explore all angles, investigators examined the victim's recent contacts. They combed through the contents of Holly's and Bill's cell phones, laptops, and social media accounts. During this digital sweep, a curious detail emerged. Both Holly and Bill had communicated with the same mysterious phone number in the days leading up to their deaths. The number, which was untraceable through conventional means, raised immediate red flags. Such anonymous numbers are often used in illicit dealings, or by people who wish to conceal their identities. While it was impossible to determine the identity of the person behind the number right away, detectives suspected foul play. They sought assistance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, whose specialized cybercrime unit could help trace the number through more advanced methods. While the investigation into the phone records continued, detectives turned their attention to the security footage from Holly's home. Holly had installed surveillance cameras as part of her efforts to protect herself from Bill's harassment. However, what the investigators found on the tapes was far more disturbing than they had anticipated. The footage revealed that shortly before Holly's death, 3 masked men had broken into her house. They were dressed entirely in black, and their faces were obscured by masks, making identification difficult. These men appeared methodical and prepared, as though they had studied the layout of the house before entering. Strangely, they took nothing from the home, even though there were valuable items in plain sight. Instead, they seemed focused on searching for something specific, and when they discovered one of the surveillance cameras, they attempted to disable it. Despite their efforts to hide their faces, their casual behavior indicated they were confident in their ability to evade capture. After the intruders left, Holly returned home from work, noticed that her house had been disturbed, and became understandably terrified. She spent the night barricading herself inside her home and had the locks changed the following day. Holly was clearly in fear for her life. But the question remained: who were these men, and why were they targeting her? At first, detectives considered the possibility that Holly was simply caught in the crossfire of Bill's troubled past. But the more they delved into her life, the more they began to question whether there was more to Holly than met the eye. A closer look into Holly's personal and professional life revealed startling information. While she had built a legitimate business with her beauty salon, Shine Aesthetics, this was not her only source of income. Holly had a hidden side to her life, one that not even her closest friends knew in full detail. Since the age of 18, she had been working part-time as an escort under the pseudonym Leah Love. Her clientele was exclusive, consisting of wealthy and powerful men who could afford her services. Holly's escort work, which included accompanying clients to events, performing massages, and other more intimate services, had provided her with a substantial income over the years. The beauty salon, as it turned out, was more of a passion project and a convenient cover for her true line of work. This revelation cast Holly's life in a different light. Her success in the escort business had allowed her to live comfortably, but it also brought with it a host of risks. Working in such a high-stakes, secretive world meant that Holly had likely crossed paths with dangerous individuals. Envy, jealousy, and obsession were all common in her line of work, and it wasn't hard to imagine that she had made some enemies along the way. Although Holly did not openly advertise her secondary profession, Bill knew about it. In fact, she had been upfront with Bill about her work when they first started dating, and though he struggled with jealousy, he initially accepted her decision to continue her escort work. However, her high-profile clients and the secrecy surrounding her profession likely drew attention from the wrong kind of people. Detectives now had to consider whether the three masked intruders were somehow connected to Holly's escort business. Had one of her wealthy clients become possessive or vengeful? Or had someone from Bill's tumultuous past learned about her hidden life and sought to exploit it? The break-in at her home appeared less like a random burglary and more like a calculated attempt to intimidate or harm her. The men had not stolen anything, which suggested that they were looking for information or leverage. Perhaps they were trying to send Holly a message, or worse, they were planning her murder all along. Adding to the complexity of the case was the realization that Holly's involvement in the escort business could have exposed her to a dangerous web of people. Men with power, money, and influence who would go to great lengths to protect their secrets. These were men who had much to lose if their association with Holly came to light. The investigation had to consider whether someone in her exclusive clientele had orchestrated the murders to silence her permanently. After all, Holly had gained a reputation for being exceptionally beautiful and charming, attracting men who were willing to pay handsomely for her company. But in doing so, she may have attracted the kind of obsession that turns deadly. At the same time, the investigation could not overlook Bill's role in this tragic story. While he may not have been directly involved in the escort world, his volatile nature and his relationship with Holly made him a potential target as well. His possessiveness over Holly, combined with his already troubled past, made him a liability to anyone who felt threatened by Holly's connections or who wanted revenge for personal reasons. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but many questions still remained unanswered. Why were Holly and Bill both murdered? Was it a crime of passion, a botched kidnapping, or something more sinister tied to Holly's secret life? As the FBI continued their work on tracing the anonymous phone number, and as detectives pursued leads from Holly's escort clientele, it became clear that this case was not just about two people in a toxic relationship. It was about power, wealth, and the dangerous allure of secrets. The CCTV footage of the masked men who had broken into Holly's home was eventually released to the public in hopes of identifying the perpetrators. However, The poor quality of the images made it difficult to draw any useful conclusions, and the public release did not yield any leads. But a significant breakthrough in the case came when the investigators were finally able to identify the anonymous number that both Holly and Bill had been in contact with. The number belonged to a 30-year-old man named Adam K.Y., a resident of North Carolina. Adam turned out to be a former military operative with specialized training in weaponry and combat tactics. He had transitioned from military service to working for a private security firm, but in reality, he operated more like a mercenary, a man for hire with a lethal skill set. What made Adam even more dangerous was his criminal background. A search into his history revealed that he had served a 4-month sentence for impersonating a police officer, a crime that should have raised more alarms than it did. During a search of his apartment, investigators found an arsenal of illegal weapons, including silencers, telescopic sights, components for explosives, and even flashbang grenades. Yet despite being in possession of such dangerous materials, Adam had somehow managed to avoid a lengthy prison sentence, suggesting he had connections or protection in high places. It was clear that Adam was a dangerous man, and the fact that his face matched the man seen in Holly's CCTV footage made him a prime suspect. With this revelation, the investigation took a sharp turn. The detectives worked hard to uncover the connection between Holly, Bill, and Adam. Given Adam's history and his skill set, it was unlikely that his involvement was a coincidence. He specialized in serious assignments, often working as a bodyguard for high-profile individuals, or carrying out operations that required stealth and precision. After Adam was brought in for questioning, the detectives were met with resistance. He was tight-lipped, offering little information that could help move the case forward. After multiple interrogations, Adam was detained, giving the investigators time to gather more evidence. While Adam remained in custody, the detectives turned their attention to another key figure who had emerged during the investigation: a man named Eric Charles Mond. Eric Mond was a successful businessman from Austin, Texas, where he owned the Mond Toyota dealership, a well-known car dealership in the area. To the outside world, Eric was the epitome of a family man, devoted to his wife and children, and a pillar of the local community. But as the detectives soon discovered, Eric had his own set of secrets. Like many men in his position, he had a weakness for extramarital affairs. One of those affairs had been with Holly Williams. Eric Mond frequently traveled to Nashville under the pretense of visiting his son, who was attending college in the area. However, during these visits, he would indulge in his secret desires, which included seeing Holly. Eric had first met Holly through her escort services, and the two had struck up a regular arrangement. Holly's beauty and charm had captivated him, and they saw each other whenever he was in town. The affair, however, was conducted under the radar, with Eric using an alias and keeping their communications discreet. On February 3, 2020, Eric, using a fake name, reached out to Holly via email. He informed her that he would soon be in town and expressed his desire to see her. Over the next few days, he continued to send messages, eagerly anticipating their meeting. In one message he wrote, "Good morning, beautiful. I'm looking forward to today. I'm in Nashville. I'll meet you at the bar like last time. Text me when you get there." From all appearances, the date had gone off without a hitch, but the affair would soon take a dark turn. By March 1, 2020, Eric received a series of anonymous threatening messages. The unknown sender claimed to have knowledge of his affair with Holly and demanded $25,000 to keep quiet. If Eric didn't comply, the blackmailer threatened to expose his infidelity to his wife, destroying his reputation and family. For a man of Eric's standing, such a scandal would be devastating. However, what Eric didn't realize at the time was that the blackmail wasn't coming from Holly or some random individual. There was a far more sophisticated operation behind it. Faced with the potential ruin of his personal and professional life, Eric Mond turned to an old acquaintance for help, a man named Gilad Peled. Gilad, aged 47, was a former associate who had been consulting for Eric's dealership, helping to resolve issues related to homeless people occupying the parking lots of his business. But more importantly, Gilad was the owner of a private security firm, a company that had taken on various protection contracts, though it had been struggling due to the ease with which Texans could arm and protect themselves. Despite his firm's dwindling business, Gilad was eager to take on a lucrative new client like Eric Mond, especially since his firm employed someone with the specialized skills to deal with the situation, none other than Adam K.Y. Gilad had started his security business after returning to Texas from Israel, where he had lived for a time. His background and training made him ideal for handling delicate and dangerous situations, and Eric's predicament presented an opportunity to prove his company's worth. Eric explained the blackmail situation to Gilad, and the two men quickly devised a plan. Instead of paying the ransom, they would eliminate the problem entirely. Eric's reputation and family life were at stake, and he was willing to go to extreme lengths to protect them. The fact that Adam, a trained mercenary, was on Gilad's payroll made it clear that this would not be a simple intimidation job. The solution would be final. The more the detectives uncovered, the clearer the motive behind Holly and Bill's deaths became. Holly's involvement with Eric, coupled with the blackmail threats, had turned her from a casual fling into a dangerous liability. Eric Mond, desperate to keep his affair a secret, had inadvertently set into motion a chain of events that would lead to murder. Bill, who had been involved with Holly but was not part of the blackmail, likely became collateral damage in the plot to silence her. His proximity to Holly and his presence on the day of the murder sealed his fate. As the investigation continued, it became apparent that the murders had been premeditated and carried out with chilling efficiency. Adam K.Y.'s role as the hired gun, Gilad's coordination, and Eric Mond's motive created a perfect storm of circumstances that led to the tragic deaths of Holly Williams and Bill Lanway. The plot, which had initially seemed like a simple crime of passion or revenge, was now revealed to be a meticulously planned execution designed to protect the reputation of a powerful businessman. A few weeks after the brutal murders of Holly Williams and Bill Lanway, a seemingly benign detail emerged that would later prove to be a critical piece of evidence in the investigation. Eric Charles Mond, the wealthy Austin businessman entangled in the affair, left a positive review on a website dedicated to private security companies. On the surface, the comment appeared innocuous. Eric praised the efficiency and professionalism of Gilad Ped's security staff, stating how pleased he was with their services. But to the detectives already on his trail, this was the break they had been waiting for. The review demonstrated a direct connection between Eric, the suspect Adam K.Y., and the slain couple. Now, the final piece of the puzzle was getting Adam to confess and unravel the web of deceit. Adam had been resisting interrogation, but the detectives warned him that silence would only make things worse. They pressed him, emphasizing that the case was already closing in on all involved. Gradually, Adam began to crack. He revealed that Eric Mond had indeed sought help from Gilad Ped after receiving threatening messages. Eric, feeling the pressure of potential blackmail, complained of harassment and extortion. At the time, he suspected Holly might be involved, and so he asked Gilad to investigate the matter discreetly. Gilad, in turn, brought Adam into the fold, alongside another ex-military associate, Brian Brockway. Brockway, like Adam, had a background in combat and special operations, making them the perfect duo for such a sensitive and dangerous assignment. Initially, the task was simple. Find the person behind the threatening messages and intimidate them into silence. Adam and Brian began their surveillance of Holly and Bill. Adam reported their findings back to Gilad, filing progress reports that read more like military debriefings than the typical notes of private investigators. The investigation quickly revealed that Bill Lanway, Holly's ex-boyfriend, was behind the blackmail. Bill had discovered Holly's affair with Eric Mond and saw an opportunity to both get revenge on his ex and make a quick fortune. Under an alias, he had been texting Eric, threatening to expose his affair unless he was paid $25,000. When Bill's involvement became clear, the mission took a darker turn. Gilad Ped's orders shifted from merely intimidating Bill to eliminating him, as well as Holly, who could become a liability. Eric Mond, panicked and terrified of losing everything, agreed to this escalation. Bill had continued to harass Eric, and the final straw came on March 11th when Eric received a phone call at his house. If his wife had answered, the caller would have exposed the affair, destroying Eric's reputation and family. In that moment of fear, Eric agreed to Gilad's proposal to deal with Bill and Holly, offering a staggering $750,000 for the job. The plan was set into motion. On March 12, 2020, Holly and Bill were seen leaving her house together. They got into a car and headed off, unaware that they were being followed by Adam and Brian. The couple's fate was sealed when they were intercepted by the armed mercenaries. Adam and Brian kidnapped Holly and Bill, taking them to a remote construction site on Old Hickory Boulevard. There, they shot both victims and left their bodies in the backseat of their car, which they then pushed down an embankment to make it look like a tragic accident. With the killings complete, the mercenaries meticulously worked to remove any trace of their involvement. They returned the rental car they had used for the mission, destroyed incriminating evidence, and then scattered to different locations. After Adam, Brian, and Gilad were all arrested, the detectives decided to play one final card. They wanted to catch Eric Mond red-handed, and the best way to do that was to use his paranoia against him. One of the mercenaries, acting on the detective's orders, contacted Eric and fabricated a story. Gilad, posing as if he were still a free man, called Eric and claimed that one of their partners had found out about the murders and was now demanding a cut of the payout. Gilad suggested they handle this new threat the same way they had dealt with Bill and Holly, by eliminating him. Despite his growing desperation, Eric Mond, furious at the thought of another person knowing his secret, agreed to commit another murder. His willingness to continue the violence was shocking, but it confirmed what the detectives already suspected. Eric would stop at nothing to protect his reputation and keep his secrets buried. On December 10, 2021, the arrest of prominent businessman Eric Charles Mond sent shockwaves through Austin's elite. Eric, along with his co-conspirators, Adam Carey, Brian Brockway, and Gilad Ped, was charged with contract murder. Of the four accused, only Eric expressed any remorse for the crime, while the mercenaries, Adam and Brian, remained cold and unrepentant. Before their arrests, detectives had bugged the conversations of Gilad and Brian. The recordings revealed a disturbing lack of conscience, as the two men joked about the murders, remarking that the couple got off easy, displaying chilling indifference to the lives they had taken. As the full story emerged, it became clear that Holly and Bill had been caught in a deadly game orchestrated by powerful men who cared little for the collateral damage they caused. Their lives were taken to preserve the reputation of a man who thought he could buy his way out of any problem, but no amount of money could erase the evidence of his crimes, nor could it silence the truth. During his interrogation, Eric initially attempted to deflect blame onto his hired killers, claiming that his intentions were misunderstood. He insisted that he had only wanted to frighten Bill Lanway, the blackmailer, rather than orchestrate his murder. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Detectives presented transaction records, phone communications, and the surveillance reports connecting him directly to the criminal plot. Confronted with this irrefutable proof, Eric ultimately confessed to his role in the conspiracy, admitting that he had indeed hired the mercenaries to eliminate Bill and Holly. The murder-for-hire scheme was no longer just speculation. It was confirmed, and Eric's world unraveled. The court hearings began in November 2023 and lasted 2 weeks, during which the full extent of the conspiracy was laid bare. It was established that the deadly plot was set in motion in early March 2020. Financial records showed that Eric had made significant payments to Gilad Ped, the head of the private security firm. On March 5, Eric transferred $155,000 as an advance payment to Gilad, who then coordinated the operation. Gilad, being in charge of his employees' payments, distributed the funds between Adam and Brian. On March 9th, the surveillance of Holly and Bill began, with the ultimate plan being their elimination. By March 12th, the deed was done, and Eric completed the final payment of $150,000, making the total payout for the murders a staggering $750,000 by the end of the month. The court presented these financial transactions, along with other key pieces of evidence, to paint a clear picture of premeditated, cold-blooded murder. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict. On November 17, 2023, Brian Brockway and Adam Carey were found guilty of contract murder, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and kidnapping resulting in death. Gilad Ped, who had already entered into a plea deal against his co-defendants in exchange for leniency, was also convicted on similar charges. His cooperation did little to spare him from a life sentence, as his role in organizing the crime was undeniable. Eric Maughan's trial concluded on November 30th. While he was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder for hire, the jury acquitted him of the charge of kidnapping resulting in death. Nonetheless, his involvement in orchestrating the brutal killings of Holly and Bill earned him a life sentence without the possibility of parole.